Many of you know that I volunteer with First Things First, Arizona's Agency for Early Childhood. I have served as a member of the Southeast Maricopa Council for 6 years and chaired that council for at least 2. First Things First is focused on creating an early childhood network that can meet the needs of young children and their families. Those needs include things like quality education, parenting classes, hearing and vision screenings, among plenty of other services. $1 invested in early childhood yields as much as $16 in return. Similarly, a child who knows 150 words by 18 months of age will almost certainly graduate from high school. Spending money and energy meeting the needs of young children transforms our society. And what I really love about this conversation of the needs of young children is that they're attainable needs. Young children need adults to read to them and be patient with them and scribble with them and play with Play-Doh with them and talk to them. Those are things that can be done by most people. Giant problems later in life are far less likely if kids have what they need during the first 5 years of crucial development. Nurturing young children and their families is the work of justice, and it is as simple as reading a book. So, I am sure I have some sort of reputation in the First Things First organization by now, and I'll leave that up to your imagination. But I'm certain that part of that reputation means that people know I'm going to talk about the wages of preschool teachers. FTF's signature program is Quality First, which offers supports to schools along with a rating system for quality standards and scholarships to kids who go to those schools. FTF also invests money in professional development and in some regions, scholarships for the preschool teachers to pursue associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees. Unfortunately, most preschool teachers make minimum wage or just a little bit more. And as soon as they are able to earn more money in a different setting, they do. As with most educational settings, children benefit from more experienced teachers. Programs tend to perform better if they have low staff turnover, and FTF is invested in nurturing professionals who remain in the field. So I sit in meetings about all things First Things First, and about every third meeting I say, we aren't going to fix this until preschool teachers earn more money. No one thinks I'm wrong. They also know that low wages are a barrier to a strong early childhood system. And by this time, people know I'm going to say it, like clockwork. They know I'll have a few people chime in because I'm not the only one who recognizes the problem. And staff know that I'm just fine with some uncomfortable silence until someone responds to my comment. But I hope and I trust that in those moments I'm not being a jerk. I'm living out the gospel, pursuing justice just by showing up and asking a question. This widow in today's parable gets her justice by the end. It seems to happen through means that we'd discourage in kids. The whole method of, well, if you just keep asking, eventually they'll give in. And sorry parents, but kids know it works at least some of the time, and we all know it works at least some of the time. And Jesus seems to tell us that it works especially in the face of injustice. If we choose to be the squeaky wheel, things might just change. I think of a retired minister in the region who was on a personal campaign to offer Jeff Flake's voting record. He wrote Jeff Flake a letter at least once a week, and at first he got form letters in response. He responded to the form letters in detail the following weeks, and in a few months, the response letters had gotten kicked to someone else in the office. As a result, he got personalized letters back, and in a few more months, the letters were coming from someone a little higher up in the chain of command. Now, this retired pastor is always gracious and always kind, and he also had a bit of a wry smile when he talked about the letters back and forth over several years. It was the slow and steady pursuit of justice, forcing several employees in Jeff Flake's office to defend and consider their actions. I don't know what to do with Jesus' promise that God's justice will be swift. I think that is something about the reign of God that isn't here yet. And I'm much more invested in the story of a widow extracting justice from an unjust system, where the judge doesn't do what's right because it's right, but he does what's right because he's embarrassed and annoyed. I don't think this story is one of those bright, shiny gospel stories. No one is healed or fed. There are no demons involved or anyone appearing who wasn't there before. We don't even know what sort of justice the widow wanted or what she was worried about. We just know that she got it. And this isn't the story we would necessarily choose to tell about church, but there is wry laughter in it for us. Yeah, that's us. That's the church, here day in and day out, driving you just a little bit crazy until you give justice to God's people. That constancy often makes church, big C church, not one portion of the church, seem tired. I think that constancy is part of the institutional wrestling that's happening within the entire church right now. We tend to think of constancy as boring. Maybe as boring as expired condiments in our church fridges, and basements and classrooms full of AA meetings, and the rousing chorus many churches sing of, "We've always done it that way." But instead, our constancy is continuing to preach a vision of God's reign of justice, and to keep projecting that vision onto an unjust world year after year. Constancy is continuing the work of help and justice no matter what. In recent years, cities have started criminalizing homelessness in ways they hadn't before. They are instituting fines for sleeping on park benches and fines for feeding people who are sleeping on park benches, at least in some cities. And time and again, it's the churches and church people and other faith people who get in trouble for breaking those rules. They hand out food, get kicked out of the park, then show up the next day. Churches get their neighbors all riled up for letting homeless people stay in their buildings or park in their parking lots. The vast majority of the time, no one actually likes getting into a fight with the church, so laws get changed. And while churches may make some accommodations in how they provide aid, they keep going just the same. This constancy also means we choose nuance. Because we come back again and again and again as the church. In a TV show version of the presidential debates that was on the West Wing, a version that was decidedly more enjoyable than this year's debates, there was a push to give a 10-word answer. 10 words. Quick, decisive, clear, simple. And that's nice. But it didn't work in those debates, and it's not the answer of the church, who is there constantly and readily. Let's go back to this picture from our call to worship. There's another picture floating around of a homeless man standing behind another man who has a hiring now sign. We're supposed to think that the person is homeless because they won't get a job. There's somebody offering right there. But I'm pretty sure that most church people know it's not that simple. How on earth does that person make it to work if they don't have some place to sleep at night? Where would they shower? Where would they do laundry? Are they going to get fired if public transportation is late? Will the employer pay them up front so they can get the clothes they need for their job? Does the job even pay enough to get the person into housing? Is the employer going to offer health care? Especially if the person needs treatment for something before they can begin work. Getting a job is not quite so easy a solution. And I remember one of our iHelp guests, now several years past, who had plenty of skills. And he ended up with a perfect storm of events that led to his homelessness. He was only in the program a couple of weeks before getting a job with the city of Chandler that paid him well. The job, though, was on the night shift. And he would have gladly worked the night shift, but he had no option for sleeping during the day. He had to tell his employer he was homeless and risk losing his job in the process. He was lucky enough that they were able and willing to offer him a different schedule, but many people would not have fared so well, nor would they have had their privacy protected when they told their employer they were homeless. Call it constancy, call it persistence. But the church, at its best, sits in this place of the widow, asking for justice again and again until we finally get it. And while we have a vision of a more just system, we still manage to extract justice from the unjust system. For the last several weeks, we've talked about ideas more than tangible things. We've talked about the beginning of Jesus' ministry, where he comes. He comes for the poor, the prisoners, the blind, the oppressed. We've talked about loving your enemy even when that enemy wants to harm you. We've talked about the Good Samaritan and our call to choose compassion even when we're tired. We've talked about the problem of wealth that is accumulated rather than put to work. Those are all different aspects of pursuing justice. And we keep our eyes, our prayers, our votes on God's justice, even when the options before us miss the mark. And even in the face of great injustice, let us be persistent in pursuing God's justice. Again and 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 again, even if we only get justice because somebody wants us to finally shut up. Amen.